Hey, good morning. Do you ever wonder how we found out the human body contains 70% water? You can thank General Shiro Ishii. In the 1930s and 40s, he found out the human body contained 70% water by weighing prisoners of war before and after placing them in convection ovens. He dehydrated them, effectively making human-sized jerky. Yeah, it's gonna be a rough one today. Ishii was in charge of Unit 731, a covert research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that specialized in biological and chemical warfare. A special project codenamed Maruta used human beings for experiments. These Chinese test subjects were common criminals, bandits, anti-Japanese partisans, political prisoners, homeless, and the mentally handicapped. They were arrested by the Japanese police for suspicious activities. Researcher Nakagawa Yanzo watched these experiments and said some of the experiments had nothing to do with advancing the capability of germ warfare or medicine. You see, there's a such thing as professional curiosity. What would happen if we did such and such? What medical purpose was served by performing and studying beheadings? Well, none at all. But that was just playing around. See, professional people like to play too. Both male and female prisoners were deliberately infected with syphilis and gonorrhea to study the effects of untreated venereal diseases, much like the American Tuskegee experiments. After infecting them with diseases, researchers performed invasive surgery without anesthesia to remove organs in order to study the effects of diseases on the human body. Thousands of men, women, children, and infants died because of this. Many prisoners had their limbs amputated in order to study blood loss. Those limbs were then sometimes reattached to the opposite side of the body. Some prisoners had their stomachs surgically removed and esophagus reattached to the intestines. They even removed parts of the brain, lung, and liver just to see what would happen. In Units 731 and 1644, they bred fleas infected with the bubonic plague and used military airplanes to spread them over Chinese provinces. They even infected wells, marshes, and houses with typhoid and paratyphoid germs, as well as infusing them into snacks that were distributed to the locals. Of course, epidemics broke out shortly afterward, and it made many of the researchers happy because they found out that paratyphoid fever was the most effective of the pathogens. They created bombs filled with those fleas, typhoid, dysentery, cholera, and anthrax. They even used Chinese prisoners of war to test the effectiveness of grenades by exposing them to direct bomb blasts. They were strapped unprotected to wooden planks that were staked into the ground at increasing distances. Then they detonated the grenade. It was surgery for most, autopsies for the rest. In other tests conducted at Unit 731, Chinese prisoners of war were deprived of food and water just to see how long it took them to die. Others were placed in low-pressure chambers until their eyes popped from their sockets. Others were experimented on just to determine the relationship between temperature, burns, and human survival. Yet others were hung upside down until they died. Some were crushed with heavy objects. Others were electrocuted, dehydrated with hot fans, placed into centrifuges and spun until death. Others were injected with animal blood. They were exposed to lethal doses of X-rays. They were subjected to various chemical weapons inside gas chambers. They were injected with seawater. They were burned and buried alive. That and so much more happened right up until the end of World War II. In the end, some of the Japanese researchers were tried by the Soviet Union at the Kharbarovsk war crimes trial in 1949. Meanwhile, the United States government gave them immunity in exchange for the information and experience they gained in bioweapons so that we could use them in our biological warfare program. Just like we did with the German researchers in Operation Paperclip. That's right. We brought German and Japanese scientists to American soil and gave them immunity in exchange for all the information they gathered by torturing innocent people.